This week on Airborne, Randy Babbitt is out of the FAA. The NTSB wants to know more about safety precautions at air shows, and the U.S. Air Force is cutting back on its demo teams. All that and more on this edition of Airborne for the week ending December 9th, 2011. I'm Ashley Hale. Welcome to Airborne on Aero-TV. There's no contest for the story of the week. The FAA Administrator Randy Babbitt was arrested on charge of driving while intoxicated last Saturday by police in Fairfax City, Virginia. The incident is an ugly explanation point at the end of his long and otherwise distinguished career as a flight instructor, airline pilot, two-term pilot union president, and industry consultant. The timing was incredibly awkward for the administrator. President Obama is just underway with his re-election campaign. Babbitt's immediate boss, Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, has made drunk driving a front-burner issue, and the DOT claims it wasn't notified of the incident until after ANN had already gone public with the story on Monday. The official line is that Babbitt immediately requested and was granted a leave of absence Monday afternoon. Tuesday, he made his full resignation official. In his statement, Babbitt called his time as administrator the highlight of his professional career, but added, quote, "I am unwilling to let anything cast a shadow on the outstanding work done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by my colleagues at the FAA. They run the finest and safest aviation system in the world, and I am grateful that I had the opportunity to work alongside them." In his official reaction, LaHood was polite, quote, "I'm proud to say that we have the safest aviation system in the world, and thanks to Randy's stewardship, it became safer and stronger. On behalf of the American people, I thank him for his service and his leadership." Despite taking stands against general aviation on issues such as user fees, the Block Aircraft Registration Request Program, and residential through the fence agreements, Randy Babbitt continued to hold the respect of GA advocacy groups. AOPA's Craig Fuller commented, quote, "Randy Babbitt worked diligently to ensure that the U.S. aviation system remains the safest in the world. We will respect and miss his leadership." Deputy Administrator Michael Huerta takes over for now. It's not clear whether President Obama will nominate a permanent successor before the elections next November. Barnstorming is the name of Jim Campbell's popular editorial commentaries that appear online on the Aero-News Network, as well as here on Airborne. These editorial insights are not only provided now and then by ANN's cantankerous editor-in-chief, but may also be contributed by a number of luminaries and aero pundits from throughout the aviation and aerospace world. As a matter of fact, airborne contributions from AEA President Paula Dirks, as well as EAA President Rod Hightower, are coming soon. In the meantime, and with all that has happened at the FAA this week, Jim Campbell is on deck to tackle the damage done to the FAA, and as well as taking a look at grassroots movements to draft a replacement for Randy Babbitt. And it's a familiar name.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, obviously, it's not been a very good week for the aviation business. After a weekend incident in which the now former FAA Administrator Randy Babbitt was stopped by the Fairfax City Police Department and subsequently found and charged with DWI, the normal political process wended its way in fairly short order, and Randy Babbitt wound up without a job. He submitted his resignation to the head of DOT. It was accepted, and frankly, the White House insiders basically said that there was really little choice in the matter with the way the administration, and especially DOT, had made statements in regards to issues involving DWI incidents and things of that nature. And of course, the FAA has been increasingly unforgiving of pilots who have been charged with any infraction of DWI or even refusing a breathalyzer over the last few years. So the example has been made, the example has been set, and we're left without an FAA administrator. This is a tough time to not have a boss at the helm, and more important, not a bureaucrat, but somebody who can push ahead the necessary agendas to, one, get next-gen through and a number of other proposals and programs to keep the FAA running safely and the rest of aviation running safely as well. So what do? Well, no matter what, we're going to wind up with a tremendous political football. We're less than a year away from an election. There's no question it'll be somebody the Democrats hate, the Republicans hate, or maybe both hate, and one way or another we're going to get nowhere with the usual political skirmishing that goes on in these kinds of times. With one exception, one possible exception. And it kind of came out of right field, but the more I think of it, the more it makes sense. Tweet showed up last night, followed by a blog post, and now a petition to the White House that basically says, draft Sully. That's right, Captain Chesley Sullenberger, one of the two men who navigated a stricken Airbus dead stick into the Hudson River with no loss of life and with uncharacteristic calm, poise, and professionalism. And thereafter went out and became true figureheads for the aviation community and made us all proud with their professionalism, good humor, and frankly, just plain competence. Sullenberger is an aviation safety expert. He's got tremendous bona fides, of course, as a senior captain for U.S. Air and for some of the political stands he's taken so far. This is a guy that few people can argue with. I think he'd get the respect of the industry. And while it sounds a little bit off at first, the more I think of it, the more it makes sense. Right now, we're halfway through what would have been the term for Randy Babbitt. We've got so much unfinished business to do. We need somebody who can survive the political process with very little posturing, and if that isn't Chesley Sullenberger, who is? And let's face it, we know the man can do the job. We know he's one of us. He's been a chairman for Young Eagles. He's been a part of VAA. He's a part of general aviation. His work in aviation safety predates the Hudson River incidents by years and years and years. And the fact of the matter is, we could do far worse. So what do you think, folks? Draft Sully? It's kind of got a ring to it, don't you think? For Aero-News, Aero-TV, and of course, Airborne, I'm Jim Campbell.
The news in 2011 has been marred by a couple of high-profile airshow accidents, and of course, the tragedy at the Reno air races. The NTSB has responded by scheduling a hearing on air race and airshow safety. It will be chaired by NTSB Chairman Deborah Hersman, and all 5 board members will participate. During the one-day meeting, they'll gather information on the safety regulations and oversight in the planning and execution of these events. Regulators, industry organizations, and airport authorities will be questioned about safety practices, procedures, and protocols. The hearing will be held on January 10th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time at NTSB headquarters in Washington, D.C. The FAA has announced that effective immediately, the Block Aircraft Registration Request Program, or BARR for short, will remain available for private aircraft without the restrictions announced in June. The FAA had proposed to make anyone on an IFR flight plan trackable through services such as FlightAware, unless there was a valid security concern. But a House Appropriations bill would specifically prohibit the FAA from using any funding to implement the security concern requirement. Earlier this year, NBAA and AOPA filed a court challenge to the government's changes to the program, and the EAA filed a friend of the court brief supporting the suit. It appears the legal action will now be unnecessary. You're watching Airborne, more in a moment.
The DFC-90 all-digital attitude-based autopilot delivers significant performance and safety improvements over previous generation systems. Its innovative flight envelope protection guards against autopilot-induced stalls, and the straight and level mode provides one-button recovery from unusual attitudes for an added measure of safety. Immensely popular within the Cirrus community, the DFC-90 is now being made available for a growing list of aircraft including Piper Matrix and Mirage, Cessna 182s, and Beech Bonanzas and Barons. Fly with confidence. Fly with DFC-90.
Welcome back. If you'd like to suggest a story for Airborne, Aero-TV, our website, or our podcast, drop us an email to news-spy@aero-news.net. The NTSB has issued a preliminary report on a very sad general aviation accident Thanksgiving Eve that claimed 6 lives. A pilot picking up his kids for a Thanksgiving visit flew into the side of a mountain just after takeoff from Falcon Field in Mesa, Arizona. So far, investigators say nothing appeared to be wrong with the plane, and the pilot gave no indication of problems before impact. Radar records show that the Rockwell 690, a turboprop twin, descended from the Aero Commander 520, leveled off at 4,500 feet, and tracked an essentially straight line toward a peak which reached 4,640 feet. The impact site was on rocky terrain about 150 feet below the top. Ground scars were consistent with impact and a wings level attitude. The pilot had about 2,500 total hours of flight experience and had recently acquired the plane. Cessna has launched a safety initiative to educate 100 and 200 series single-engine piston aircraft owners around the world about new supplemental aircraft inspection procedures that will be added to Cessna's service manuals. This will potentially affect a big portion of the general aviation fleet. ANN's Tom Patton has more.
Ashley, the airplanes covered by this new safety initiative are 100 and 200 series piston singles built between 1946 and 1986. That's when Cessna stopped building piston singles for a while. What's outlined are visual inspection procedures and intervals based on the age of the airplane and hours of operation. They're designed to detect corrosion and damage caused by structural fatigue. Beth Gamble, Cessna's principal engineer for airframe structures, says the procedures are very simple and based on visual inspections that can be done easily and quickly by trained service personnel during the airplane's annual. Cessna plans a series of educational opportunities on the new inspection procedures, starting with the company's authorized parts and service facilities. The inspections for 200 series aircraft are being incorporated into service manuals now, and the changes for the 100 series aircraft will begin in April of 2012. For Airborne, I'm Tom Patton.
Traditionally, if you ask the U.S. Air Force how air shows pencil out, the answer has always been that they're a boon to recruitment. But with defense budgets coming under closer scrutiny, it's apparently getting harder to sell that up the line. An official Air Combat Command statement forwarded to ANN says that due to significant fiscal constraints, the command is cutting back from 6 single-ship demonstration teams to just 1 in 2012, that being the F-22. By way of explanation, the command says, quote, "Reducing the number of single-ship demonstration teams will allow us to reallocate more than 900 sorties to our wings. Reallocating those sorties will provide an increase of more than 25 combat-ready fighter pilots. That's a very good thing for our nation and wise stewardship of our limited resources." The Air Force says that the Thunderbirds demo team will fly a full schedule of air shows in 2012. When the Air Force launched its X-37B orbital test vehicle back in March, the mission profile called for the unmanned spacecraft to land 270 days later, which would have been Wednesday, November 30th. But it didn't. So how much longer will it be up there? Lieutenant Colonel Tom McIntyre, the Spacecraft Systems Program Director, told the LA Times only that, quote, "Keeping the X-37 in orbit will provide us with additional experimentation opportunities and allow us to extract the maximum value out of that mission." The Air Force says that the X-37B is strictly a test bed, but some analysts think that the service could be developing an anti-satellite weapon or a space-capable bomber. The U.S. military is dismissing the latest claim by Iran that it has downed a U.S. drone. The Pentagon does say the U.S. Air Force lost control of an RQ-170 Sentinel UAV over western Pakistan, but there is no evidence it was shot down by Iran. As it has done in other recent claims, the Iranian government has used the alleged airspace violation to threaten retaliatory action. The Al-Alam state TV network quoted a military source as saying, quote, "The Iranian military's response to the American spy drone's violation of our airspace will now be limited to Iran's borders." Reuters notes the incident comes at a time when Tehran is trying to quell growing international outrage over the storming of the British embassy in Tehran. Iranian diplomats have been expelled from Britain, and Germany, France, and Spain have recalled their ambassadors from Iran. A high-ranking U.S. Navy officer says Lockheed Martin and the Pentagon need to put the brakes on production of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter after fatigue testing revealed potential flaws in the design. Vice Admiral David Vinlett tells AOL Defense Recent revelations that some parts will have to be redesigned to give the airplane its originally estimated service life will significantly drive up the cost, which is already high. Vinland doesn't say the program should be scrapped, and the question is not whether to build it, but how many and at what rate. In a new study, The Market for Business Jet Aircraft, Forecast International predicts that 10,907 business jets will be produced between now and 2020, valued at over $230 billion, unadjusted for inflation. It also projects that business jet production will resume growing in 2012 after declining each of the previous 3 years. FI senior aerospace analyst Raymond Jaworski says, quote, business jet production in 2012 will show some minor improvement over 2011, but more substantial growth in build rates will have to wait until 2013. FI predicts the worst of the industry downturn is over, but much of the business jet market remains sluggish, especially the light and medium jet segments. Demand is considerably stronger at the top of the market in the large cabin and long-range sectors. In just a moment, our Aero video of the week captures one pilot's terrifying wildlife encounter in the Himalayas. I'm Ashley Hale and you're Airborne on Aero-TV.
Since its inception, Redbird Flight Simulations has been dedicated to developing new training technologies and processes in an ongoing effort to make aviation safer, more affordable, and more accessible.
We're using technology to make this kind of training accessible to all flight schools of all sizes and all budgets, and to democratize flying in general, because we make this kind of training more accessible to people.
For more information about Redbird Flight Simulations, as well as Redbird's new Skyport, visit www.redbirdflightsimulations.com or www.redbirdskyport.com.
Thanks for joining us this week. Each week we share with you a sample of an online video one of our viewers thought was especially entertaining. We call it AVW, the Aero Video of the Week. Flying experiences captured on helmet cams are becoming commonplace, but there's nothing common about this one. A Russian paraglider pilot identified only as Paraglider was making his first flight in the Himalayas on October 17th, when he caught the unwanted curiosity of a young eagle. And we're not talking about the EAA kind. Not everyone carries a reserve chute when paragliding, but it was a wise precaution on this day. After an ugly but successful landing through some small trees, Paraglider did something which may have taken more courage than managing his own emergency. He got in close enough to untangle the frightened eagle, which can be seen flying away as the recording ends. To watch the entire 6-minute video, go to YouTube and enter Viral Craze Eagle in the search box. That's Viral Craze, spelled as one word without a space. With costs for new aircraft rising and an extended recession pinching law enforcement budgets, many agencies have had to mothball their expensive helicopters. So have they considered flying LSAs instead? Until recently, the answer was an indignant no, but things may be changing. ANN's Paul Plack has more.
If they could perform the required missions, light sport aircraft could be saving police agencies a ton of money. But up until now, perception has been an issue. Professional pilots of big turbine helicopters usually used by law enforcement, and even some members of the general public, look on LSAs and police use as toys. But those barriers may be coming down. In Tulare County, California, they used $20,000 in seized drug money to leverage a federal grant for another $200,000 and bought a CTLE. That's the law enforcement variant of Flight Design's popular CTLS light sport aircraft. Captain Dave Williams tells the Fresno Bee that compared to a helicopter, quote, instead of $500 an hour to fly, it's more like $35 an hour. It will do 95% of what a helicopter can do at 1/10 the cost. In Tomball, Texas, Police Chief Robert Hawk has used a $40,000 federal grant to cover part of the cost of a test involving an autogyro MTO Sport gyroplane. He finds its LSA economics compelling in this application.
We have a responsibility to keep our officers as safe as we can. We have a responsibility to the community to keep the community as safe as we can, and we have a responsibility to be good stewards with taxpayers' money. And when it comes right down to it, and for a $74,000 investment, which is what this aircraft costs, versus about a $4 million investment for an A-Star helicopter, when we put two officers, a trained pilot and a trained tactical flight officer in the air in this aircraft, it's the equivalent of 20 officers on the ground.
In fairness, the small tandem gyros out of Europe are more analogous to a police motorcycle than a police helicopter, and a 100-horsepower two-place rotorcraft offers marginal takeoff and climb performance with typical police loads on a hot day. Sportcopter, an Oregon company, hopes to address those shortcomings with the Sportcopter 2. It has enough cabin width to carry two big officers with shoulder holsters on, comes with a multi-camera FLIR system, a 220-horsepower Lycoming power plant, and heavy-duty electrical system. But it's still an experimental, and at 1,600 pounds gross, it can never be an LSA. It could be used in factory-built form by law enforcement agencies under the public use exemption, but it's not clear yet when deliveries will be available. In the meantime, Flight Design has found a way to sell an LSA for $220,000. I'd expect success like that to attract more options in the law enforcement segment for LSAs in the near future. For Airborne, I'm Paul Plack.
GE reports the FAA has granted approval for 330-minute extended-range twin-engine operations, or ETOPS for short, for the GE NX-1B engine. The new power plant will be used on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The requirements included a demanding 3,000-cycle ground endurance test in April. ETOPS approval provides airlines much greater route scheduling flexibility because it allows twin-engine aircraft to service routes which in the past required 3- and 4-engine aircraft. The phrase, "Houston, we have a problem," is a famous line from the 1995 Ron Howard movie Apollo 13.
Houston, we have a problem.
Not to mention the real thing. Now, the handwritten notes of Commander James Lovell, including the hand calculations which led to the safe return of the spacecraft to Earth, have brought $388,000 in auction. Lovell tells Reuters, quote, "I was cleaning out some old stuff on a bookcase and found it. My kids took all they wanted and I donated a lot of my collection to museums. I decided to put this up for auction so that someone who is really interested in this piece of history can enjoy it." Other space memorabilia sold in the auction included an American flag from the Apollo 11 mission in 1969, which brought $33,000, and an overall training jacket worn by retired astronaut John Young, which sold for almost $18,000. Pipistrel is holding an art contest to design the livery of the first Panthera, which will be presented at major air shows and on a media tour in 2012. The deadline is January 10th, and your entry must include 3 images of your design on a 3-view template available on the company's website. Pipistrel's panel of judges will choose a winner to receive €1,000 and a signature design credit on the actual plane. Find out more at www.panthera-aircraft.com. A Cirrus SR-20 on a night flight from Sanford International Airport in Orlando, Florida to Jacksonville Executive Airport at Craig Field made an emergency landing last Saturday night on a busy interstate highway. Neither the flight instructor nor the student pilot were injured. Florida State Highway Patrol Sergeant Dennis Smith told the Florida Times-Union that the plane developed engine trouble and the CFI, David Rowe, of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, somehow put it down safely south of Jacksonville in the clutter of on and off ramps where I-295, I-95, and Florida 9A connect. The plane was undamaged until its left wing was hit by a pickup truck, which did not stop after the accident. Police say they would like to speak to the driver of that truck. Finally this week, generally speaking, it's against the law to make supersonic flights over populated areas. But NASA is studying technology that will reduce the impact of sonic booms, which could one day clear the way for supersonic coast-to-coast airline flights. NASA's Waveforms and Sonic Boom Perception and Response project gathered data from more than 100 residents of Edwards Air Force Base and correlated their reactions to sonic booms with precise waveform measurements taken by ground sensors. If the goal is to find out how loud is too loud, people who choose to live at an Air Force base may not be the best guinea pigs. At Edwards, a sonic boom causes residents to exclaim, "Cool." In Santa Monica, it causes residents to exclaim, "Let's just say things we can't share in mixed company." Get comprehensive, real-time 24/7 coverage of the latest aviation and aerospace stories anytime at aero-news.net. And join us again next week for another edition of Airborne here on Aero-TV. I'm Ashley Hale. Thanks for watching. See you next week.